It's one of the biggest myths of scams and frauds is that, I'm too clever to be scammed. I do this for a living and I don't think I'm too clever to be scammed.
Katie.morley is consumer champion for the Telegraph. She's won back around £10 million for scam and fraud victims, including those who should have been protected but weren't.
To her, this was the difference between having a secure roof over her head, having the care that she needed to for the rest of her life.
That's what was most shocking about reading your work, is there's two elements to this. There's getting scammed, and then there's the company itself not fulfilling its obligation to help people that are scammed.
That's what makes me so cross, because it shouldn't be down to me really to do this.
You alluded to a time that you were scammed previously.
Are we all going about mine? What about you? Okay.
I'll tell you mine afterwards. Mine's close to the bone.
I'll show you mine, you show me yours.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
The one thing that shocked me is, and we'll get into some of the specific stories, is just how many people fall victim to this and how many of them are quote unquote normal people. I think the stat I've got here is that the Financial Conduct Authority say that 27.7 million adults are vulnerable.
Yeah.
Which is like half of the UK population almost.
Yeah, it's like a staggering amount, but I think it's important to say that like anyone can be vulnerable and that can happen at like different times in their life. So like if I think about the times when I've personally been vulnerable, after I had a baby, I was in a lot of pain, sleep deprived, I would have been classed as vulnerable at that point, but right now I'm not. So it just depends if you've been bereaved, if you're ill, if you've got a divorce or some sort of traumatic life event going on, then banks or financial institutions could class you as vulnerable.
Why do the FCA think it's important to track the amount of vulnerable people in the UK?
It's because banks and financial institutions have to protect and do more to protect vulnerable customers, so people that need more support than the general population, and that's something that isn't optional for them. They have to do it under the regulations.
So I think most people think that you only get scammed if you're dumb and you reply to an email and someone's promising you money and then you sign up for it and then you lose loads of money. But you're saying that it can be just different stages of your life. You could not be vulnerable this month, but in 2 months something happens and then 100%. That can make you vulnerable.
It's one of the biggest myths of scams and frauds is that, I'm too clever to be scammed. I do this for a living and I don't think I'm too clever to be scammed. And if you think that you're too clever to be scammed, then you're automatically in a camp of people that are actually probably more at risk of being scammed. It's a weakness, actually, to think this could never happen to me. So although most people are unlikely to fall for it at any given time, it really depends on the situation. And often the cases that I see, the people that I speak to are incredibly lucid, intelligent individuals. It could be my neighbour or somebody somebody that I know. And I think to myself, how have you fallen for this? But then when you actually dig down into what actually happened and when and what was going on in their life at the time, I'd say 9 times out of 10, it is because they've been vulnerable at that moment, or there's been a sort of unlucky set of circumstances that has led up to that moment of the scam. One of the stories that stood out was a woman who took medication and that basically made her vulnerable. This was one of the most staggering cases that I've ever come across, and I think it turned out to be the biggest win that I've ever had. This lady sort of had a dream life. She was sort of living in a £2 million house, working in public relations, had the family, living the dream. She then went through a divorce and she also had Parkinson's disease, which is an awful, awful illness. And she was on this horrible medication called Ropinirole. And that has a few very strange side effects. One of them is it can cause people to have a much higher sex drive. It can cause people to sort of have a bigger risk profile, so to gamble where they wouldn't normally, or sort of take risks and be, irresponsible where normally they'd be a completely responsible person. And unfortunately for her, it was the latter. She sort of had this extra appetite for risk, and she responded to an advert where this company said, invest £250 and you can make some money. And she got sucked into that. And over the course of 5 years, she gave them £829. She believed £829,000. Yeah, so nearly £1 million. Wow. And that was money from her divorce settlement. And she believed she was going to be given an annuity that would give her £20,000 a month for the rest of her life. But obviously it was a complete scam and this person got away with all the money. She then complained to her bank, Barclays, and they kind of pushed her away. And she just sat on this for a really long time. She was deteriorating in health. She was struggling to pay the bills, food on the table, like that level of poverty, basically. She had nothing. And she reached out to me, and the letter that she sent me wasn't particularly coherent. It was handwritten. I looked at it and I sort of thought, I don't know what's behind this, but this person's not okay. And I spoke to her and sort of got the story and went to Barclays. And the way that I approached it was I got her to get a doctor's note to prove that she was on this medication. Obviously, kind of like talking to her at length, figured out that she was on this medication. She wasn't forthcoming with it all. I had to kind of extract it all out of her. She would never in a million years have thought to tell Barclays that she was on this medication. But because I knew how Barclays assesses these cases and how to get people their money back from scams, because I know the processes that the bank used, I made sure that I extracted all the information from her that Barclays needed to see in order to refund the £829,000. So she got all her money back in the end. Wow. And she just couldn't believe it. I mean, to her, this was the difference between having a secure roof over her head, having the care that she needed to for the rest of her life, dealing with the Parkinson's. Like, she was needing proper care at this point and not being able to afford it. So, like, I mean, she still messages me sometimes to kind of check in, and she's just so grateful. She just couldn't believe it.
You're like a financial superhero. But how much do banks normally cover?
I mean, this is where I wanted to go with the question in a way, because it's like, how much should they cover? And it's hard for them, because how would they know that you're on these tablets? And
no, they wouldn't. Yeah, they wouldn't. And that's the thing. It's sort of, it is up to the customer to, if they do get scammed, it is up to them to complain in the right way to the bank. And unfortunately, because most of the people that have lost big money in these scams are vulnerable, they might not be in the position to put forward a good case, which is kind of where I come in.
The doctor should say something. The medical professional should say this kind of drug is. It's almost like, it sounds like she had like bipolar. Almost, when my auntie's bipolar, and she would be reckless and spend, and then come out of it and be like, oh God, I don't know what just happened.
Exactly. She wasn't in control of her actions. Once she was off the medication, she was okay, and she wasn't doing this anymore.
The kids said they got their mother back, which was kind of
exactly.
Like,
they felt they got mummy back, and it's heartbreaking, isn't it? But by the time she was lucid again, it was too late, and she'd already done it all. So,
if it was something like a bereavement, would you also be able to get, like, if they lost their partner, someone lost their partner, or like they lost a child and then they made a bad financial decision after?
Yeah.
Would that be grounds to potentially get their money back, or is it only because it was medical and it affected?
It's not just medical. There's a whole range of things that would potentially class you as vulnerable, but it is basically done. These decisions are made by banks on a case-by-case basis. So it's subjective. Yeah. They have like a criteria, but it's not exhaustive. So like I could they wouldn't want to kind of rule out. There could be a million different situations that could render somebody vulnerable. So instead of having a list, it's sort of like, well, you've presented your case. Does it meet our criteria? It's things like, one of the key things is if the vulnerability or the thing would impair your judgment and your decision making, because what they're looking for is somebody who wasn't in control of their decisions at the time. And if you're bereaved and in the depths of grief, then arguably you weren't thinking straight. And I think, like, generally in society, we would want people in that situation to be covered. It's interesting because, like, whenever I publish a scam story, there's usually like two camps of people that are commenting on the story or sending me feedback on email. One camp is, oh, I'm so glad that you did that for that person. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. That person really deserved their money back. And then there's people who say, I'm a shareholder in Barclays. I'm paying for this. That person shouldn't have been so stupid. Yeah. But like, generally, I think as a society, we do want to look after the vulnerable, don't we? Yeah. I think there does come a point of personal responsibility, though, and I would never want to kind of say that anyone should be covered by this, because some people are reckless and they don't have a good excuse, and that is unfortunate for them. And we don't want to live in a world where we're not encouraging personal responsibility. But I think where people's lives have been devastated by these scams, and where they are vulnerable, then we should put it right.
Yeah, I did some like fraud stuff with.
Did some fraud.
Yeah,
it's all coming out now. I was not involved.
Some live fraud. I did. It was round number 10, and the current government wanted to input some anti-fraud prevention measures because it came about that basically, say, the Germans and stuff were pursuing fraudsters more aggressively than we were. And that was pushing into, because these fraud networks are international.
Yeah.
So it was pushing them away from Germany into the UK because they saw us as a soft target. And they said that one of the things was, if we're too loose in refunding everyone, it just attracts the fraudsters to our market because they just know we can scam people, they'll get their money back. We have to be really careful in that sense of how lenient we are in terms of refunding people, because you make people reckless almost.
Yeah, but banks can use that argument. In reality, they have huge resources and technologies at their fingertips. And some of the basic errors that I see from the banks in terms of not calling people, the algorithms failing, not putting protections in place to stop fraud. So I think we have to be slightly careful in that point is completely true, and banks have a really tough job on their hands to decipher, if they're being gamed by fraudsters, and if they're being too lax on fraudsters, and if that's actually perpetuating the problem. That is completely an argument, but I do feel like the banks use that argument to detract from their own failings.
So I agree that people who've been scammed should get their money back, but I just want to play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
As a corporation, how much responsibility do they have in the same sense of Instagram, right? I'm not getting my money back if I buy a scam on that platform right now. And I bought a mirror the other day and it never showed up.
Yeah.
And I've been scammed.
Oh yeah.
So, but they should do more. But there's definitely more of a societal pressure on banks than there is, say, on a Meta to resolve those kind of issues.
It's not even societal, it's regulatory. So the social media platforms are not regulated in the same way. It is like a huge black hole in terms of where scammers lie and where scammers are doing things in social media. It needs more regulation, in my view. The difference between social media platforms and the banks is that the banks are regulated by the FCA, and the FCA mandates them to keep customers' money safe. And they have to do that in lots of different ways, and particularly relating to vulnerable customers as well, are mandated to keep vulnerable customers safe and take extra precautions to keep them safe. So that's kind of where it's all coming from. And they have all signed up to like a voluntary code as well, which is to do with giving scam victims their money back. So they've kind of voluntarily said, we will do this. And then to see some of them rowing back on that quite sneakily is very galling for somebody like me who sits there.
And is that what you see? You see them kind of trying to dodge that responsibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Which has done research on this, and certain banks are very good. So I think TSB is one of the best. They refund about 9 in 10 scam victims. But NatWest is one of the worst. And that 100% reflects my inbox as well. Whenever I've dealt with NatWest, I am having to fight tooth and nail to get anything out of them. And often, even after I've been done everything I can, exhausted everything, I've had to say, I'm sorry, this has to go to the financial ombudsman now because I can't do anything further. The case has then gone to the ombudsman, which is it's like an independent arbiter of these disputes. They then win with the ombudsman. So it shouldn't be having to get to that stage, basically.
That's the last resort, right?
It's the last resort.
Also, as well, if the ombudsman contacts a bank, they get charged and stuff. And we used to do this with PPI and things like that when I worked in finance. And it was like, if you had to refer it to that stage, the bank's getting charged again. So you know, it shouldn't have to go to that point.
Yeah.
That must be cultural then. So that's coming from the top or the director level where they're basically saying, we're stricter on this, or
they're deciding they're stricter. Because as I said, it's case by case basis on these scams. It goes kind of to a panel of judges and they look at the case in the round and they chat about it and they make a decision. Now, I've never sat in one of these meetings, but I would love to be a fly on the wall and know what goes on. But that's how they decide. So it is subjective at the end of the day.
So someone who's been scammed, who's listening, what are the kind of things that you think, these are some points that you could use, or these are the things that the bank are looking for in terms of getting money back?
So if you've been scammed and you're trying to complain to the bank to get the money back, the things that you need to really think about are, what did you do and what did the bank do? Or what could it have done more? So could the bank have provided you with more warnings as to what was going on? Were you making, like, say you usually spend, I don't know, £20 a day, and suddenly £5,000 a day is leaving your account. Did the bank ring you and say, what was that for? Did they provide you with written warnings? Did they, what did they do? Because if they didn't do anything, then it's likely that the algorithms failed and that you would have, that would go in your favour. The other thing is, are you vulnerable, or is there anything that would make, help your case in that sense? So are you bereaved recently? Do you have mental health issues? Are you on medication that's having side effects or that could impair your thinking? Is there any other factors going on? Think outside the box. Is there anything else that has meant that has led up to you doing this? And make sure that you complain in good time as well. So there's only a set window to complain as well. For the financial ombudsman, it has to be within 6 months of the actual. So you need to make sure you get your complaint in early, and then if it doesn't go well with the bank, you're still in time for the ombudsman. The bank has got 8 weeks as well to get back to you once you've raised an official complaint.
But you could complain to the bank after a couple of years, but you couldn't go.
But
that would be the last resort.
Yeah.
And so the first point of call is always the bank.
You've kind of got to go through those processes before you can go to the ombudsman.
Exactly. And make sure that you raise an official complaint and that you're filling in the form to be refunded under this is like the most geeky, unmemorable name ever, but it's the contingent reimbursement model. And maybe research that in advance as well. Maybe because that there are documents online that show you what they're looking for and that explain how it all works. So familiarise yourself with that. If there's lots of money at stake, it's worth spending, a couple of days preparing this, really.
And do you think, like, when they get a call off you, they're like, oh God, because you know what you're doing. I know what a consumer champion is, but to be honest, if I'd been scammed, I wouldn't think to have contacted you necessarily. And it might be your most avid readers. And I wonder how many people just get a no and then wander off that actually would have got their money back if they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes me so cross, because it shouldn't be down to me really to do this.
Can you guess what the biggest learning has been from doing this podcast or even my YouTube channel? It's that the most important investment you can make is in you. So for me, my path to real wealth isn't through investing, it's by building this business. And that's why I'm happy that we're working with Hostinger. Hostinger help entrepreneurs, freelancers and side hustlers with their websites. My favourite thing is their AI website builder, which helps anyone create a professional website with zero coding experience. You just describe your goal in a couple of sentences and the AI creates a beautiful looking website just like magic. You can then customize it, use the AI assistant to generate SEO friendly text, and even use their AI logo maker. It's fast, user friendly, and of course what I like the best is it's great value for money. You can get website hosting and a free domain from £2.99 a month. So if you want a website, then check out Hostinger, and if you use the code MAKINGMONEY, that's making money all one word, you'll get 10% off. And I've left the link in the description for you.
That's what was most shocking about reading your work is there's two elements to this. There's getting scammed, and then there's the company itself not fulfilling its obligation to help people that are scammed. It's almost like you've got two battles. You're getting scammed twice almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Conned out your money twice.
I'd say that it kind of falls into a few different camps. Like on the most extreme, it's kind of companies like deliberately lying to customers, deliberately getting money out of them for goods that they know that they don't have, essentially conning them. And I do see cases like that, but it is rare. Like generally companies do try and offer decent services. Yeah. Most of the cases that fall into my inbox kind of fall into this middle ground of like just poor customer service, where it's like laziness or just jobs worth type customer service people that just rely on terms and conditions and don't think about things in a real way. And generally those are quite easy to put right, but then sometimes you do have companies that dig their heels in and just are quite happy to offer a terrible service and treat customers in a terrible way. And that's obviously really disappointing. But those companies usually get what they deserve later down the line when they go bust.
And if someone feels that, you know, I've been scammed, I was vulnerable, and the company I don't feel is upholding their end of the bargain or fulfilling their duties, what's the process that they should go through?
Yeah, so if you feel like you've been treated unfairly by a company, the first thing to do is obviously raise it with the company in question. So the way to get your voice heard initially, every company will have their own complaints process, and that will depend on what sector they're in. So energy sector will have different process to banking sector to retail sector, but everything should be there on the company website. So raise an official complaint. There's nothing wrong with using the word official at any point because it will get you heard. That is a bit of a magic word in the world of complaining. So make sure that you raise it with the right people as well. So if you've emailed customer services and you're not getting anywhere with that, you could try copying in the CEO, chief executive, or somebody more senior in the company. And often you can find those details on company websites. You can find them on websites like CEO.com. They're generally available on the internet somewhere. Sometimes you have to be a bit creative about how you find things. So kind of trying to escalate things within companies. The next stage is to kind of go a bit wider and see if you can get your voice heard elsewhere if things aren't working with an internal complaint. So posting things on social media. For example, if you're posting something on Twitter, X, you could copy in people like me, Martin Lewis, like other sort of people that might be relevant in this area that kind of might make the company sit up and listen and think, oh no, you know, we might be in the media if we don't sort this out. That's always a good way of getting you know, even if like I didn't respond, for example, it's still worth doing. And you can always reach out to a consumer champion like me, of course. But obviously there are a few of us, like most newspapers have got one, but we are only able to deal with like a relatively small number of cases. But what I always say is like, you can use my name. You can say, sometimes I get people emailing saying, I threatened to tell Katie Morley of the Telegraph and I got £5,000 compensation. That has happened. So like, you might as well try it. And you can copy me in as well. You can use my email and just CC me into complaint emails. If I would say, don't do that as a sort of initial thing. Only do it if it's really not working. Yeah. And sometimes just the sight of that will get companies to do the right thing.
Do you see much from gambling?
Yes.
I used to work in the debt management industry, and we get calls from typically women, like these types of calls from women. And normally it would be, say, a Muslim woman, and she would be like, I need help. I've like gambled all the money away in the house on bingo. And if my husband finds out, like, I fear for my life or something like this, you know.
Oh, gosh.
And we would have to call the police. These is 3 or 4 times it's happened for me. But I was thinking, like, we would see the emails and the bingo companies would be like, you haven't been here for 2 days, have 10% off or whatever, you know. And I was like, how is that not a scam? Like, they're just extracting the money out of these poor people that...
Yeah, some of the tactics used by the gambling companies are disgraceful. They really are.
How is it not a scam?
Yeah.
You know, because it's a rigged game.
Yeah.
In my view, it shouldn't be allowed to be advertised.
Yeah.
No.
And I personally think that it's such a scourge on society, isn't it? Yeah. I do see quite a few people coming through that have gambled huge amounts of money on gaming and
the digital stuff.
Like online games,
they can't escape
on
it.
Those online fruit machine things as well. And those gambling companies know full well that they make all of their money
90% from 1%.
Off the 1% that have a problem, and that have like given their life savings because they can't stop or whatever. So it really is just disgusting industry. So I've had a fair few highly vulnerable gambling cases where I've won back big amounts of money for them. I've been really happy to do that because I just think it's been really clear that there's been like a pattern of them being targeted. But I have had cases where people come to me and they say, I'm vulnerable or my partner's vulnerable and they've gambled and can we get our money back? And then when I've looked into it, they're kind of trying to have their cake and eat it a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they have won before, and then they've lost, and then they're coming to me saying we want our money back.
They don't like it when they've lost.
So it's like, well, you can't keep the winnings and get your money back on the losses. So then I'm like, no.
You know, in court when they say someone's not in compos mentis, like you're not aware
of sound mind.
Yeah. So you're drunk or you're on drugs. Did you ever get that? Someone's like, I got really drunk at the football, and then I was like going home and I saw an advert for a friend I might know. And then it's like, I got really drunk, and then I end up betting on like Filipino Division 4 football at 2 a.m. Someone I know, and then you lost loads of money because you weren't in sound mind, and you're like, if I was sober and I hadn't been out of football all day, I wouldn't have gambled at 3 a.m. on Filipino.
Yeah.
Do you ever get people like that? Like I wasn't.
Yeah.
Do you ever win from those?
No, because what I would do is just sort of look at them and just not take it on. But occasionally I see one and I think, do you know what? I'm going to run that. And I'm going to say very politely why I'm not going to help you, because I think it's important that
like
people don't just see me as like a meal ticket that I'll just do anything for anyone, because I just won't. That's not true. But when you see wins every week, you do think it gives that impression.
Yeah.
So I do sort of pepper in ones where people do get told no.
Yeah. Yeah, reading through, one of the things that struck me, I've got a little section I want to read out if you want. I thought it was great journalism. First of all, it was like really impactful, but at the same time, it was like the savagery of the scammer in terms of the emotional grip that they had on this person. So I'll just read out a section. In this story, there was a lady who, for context, had lost her husband. Her children really struggled with it, and one of them ended up in a psychiatric unit. She met someone else who then died 3 years later, and she cared for them in death. And then she met someone online dating. And there was this bit, and it was, this is her to him. You seem to have invaded my whole existence. I'm thinking about you constantly. You're in my heart and on my mind every moment of the day, but I wouldn't have it any other way. To be honest, I never thought I'd meet anyone who could sweep me off my feet like you've done. Be in no doubt my commitment to you will be forever. And then it was shortly after this, the scammer decided you were ready to be extorted out of every penny you had.
They basically know, they're experts at manipulation and like tugging on emotions. You know, we're all human beings and we're all kind of emotional beings, aren't we? And some people are more susceptible to that kind of manipulation. And this poor woman had just had such like an unlucky run in her life.
Yeah.
She'd been through so much, and I just felt so bad for her. And I felt that she just really deserved a second chance at getting this money.
We had a guest on the other day, and he wrote a book called The Intelligence Trap, which is around how smart people can get themselves, they can be stupid, essentially.
So interesting.
Yeah, and it was about like cognitive biases, and there was a story in there about a man who he'd won a Nobel Prize or something, very smart, and he ended up smuggling cocaine across a border because he fell in love with a model online.
Yes.
Went to meet the model, and she was like, oh, I can't, I'm in a different studio now, can you just take my case back over the border? And it was just packed full of coke. So yeah, but with that guy, it was the same thing again of, he'd split up from his partner, he was old, and he'd gone into a vulnerable state because it's like, I'm going to die alone. And then this gorgeous model is like, oh, you know, I'm interested and I love you. I think the emotional stuff is one that everyone could relate to.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you ever been scammed?
Not in the traditional sense, but I've definitely been scammed by sort of online retailers, and you know, you order something and it arrives and it's like, oh, what's this? This is not the quality that I expected. And actually, tradesmen, I'm awful at getting not scammed, but like taken advantage of, and because the thing is, I think they just see me coming. Like I need like a badge saying consumer champion or something, because like I am not very handy myself. I can't see what needs doing with things. So I think they just instinctively know that, and they just pull the wool, and I end up giving them loads of money. And
it's not just you. I got some scratches repaired on my car. And I said and he like quoted me a price, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'll pay that, whatever, a couple of grand or something stupid. And at the end, I was like, thanks, mate, for your time. He's like, I will never forget you. And I was like, you prick, you've scammed me, haven't you? I knew in that moment, I was like, I've had my pants down here. Like, scratches being $2,000.
I think a lot of people get done by car mechanics, because I went in for like something, he's like, yeah, it should be 400 quid.
Oh, the left phalange's broken.
Cool, yeah, the left phalange. They call me back the next day. He's like, yeah, you have no phalange. It's going to cost you $2,500. I'm like, I thought this was like a £400 like
wanted
tyre
the
change and
I wanted the
suspension, and then it's
windshield.
like 2.5 grand. And I'm like, well, you've got my car and I need it back, so here's 2.5 grand. I'm like, I don't even know what you did.
Oh no, it's
now,
stuff like that, isn't it?
Now I go to a trusted mechanic. Always use like the same mechanic every time, someone you know and trust. That's what I learned.
You alluded to a time that you were scammed previously.
Are we all going about mine? What about you? Okay,
I'll tell you mine afterwards. Mine's close to the bone.
I'll show you mine, you show me yours. Yeah. Okay, let's go. I got scammed in shock horror crypto. So my friend Luke, I will name and shame him because it's in the newspapers.
He's not your friend.
Oh yeah, he's definitely not my friend. True. I had an associate I worked with when I was working for a crypto exchange. We went to loads of crypto events together, lots of parties. We were good friends. And he started a crypto project, and he said, he always used to tell people, I used to be homeless. Like, I really want to make something for the community so we could all sit at the big table together and eat with the big boys. This is for us. So it sounded great. He got into the House of Lords, and he was talking about the project. Everyone in the crypto community in London was talking about it. We all invested loads. At one point, it was valued at £665 million. I invested $8,000, and because he was my friend, in inverted commas, he said, look, I'll give you $16,000 worth of tokens because you're my boy, but for $8,000, you could sell it right now for $16,000, but I know you're not going to because you're my boy. I'll tell you when to sell. We've got loads of things coming up. It's going to go up. So I could have sold immediately for double, but because I trusted him, he's like, this is going to go to the moon. Your 8 grand will become like 50 grand in like a few weeks. So obviously I didn't think it would be a few weeks, but it was going the right way. Everything was going up. And that's how they raised 660 million pounds. Then one day the price started going down. I called him like, dude, the price is going down. Should I sell? He's like, don't worry. We're about to launch version 2 next week. And then it's going to give us a pump and then you can sell. Meanwhile, he ran off to Dubai and Thailand and the Philippines, all over the world.
Left his kid and...
Left his wife and his daughter. And all he cared about, when I met him, he's like, oh, I don't want to stay out too late. I've got to get back to my daughter. She's my world. She's all that matters. Now he's out in Dubai with like security. He got loads of death threats, obviously, from like the whole of the London community. A Premier League football player invested. Loads of people invested. I'm glad I only put in 8 grand. Some of my friends put in 50, 100. Everyone got greedy because... once the price goes up, you're like, take some more. So,
and he gained your trust.
Yeah, and I almost put in my clients' money into it. I have a crypto fund. I was about to put in some of my clients' money as well, like 10 grand from different clients. And luckily I didn't, because then I'd have to explain to them that I lost their money. And so now he's still on the run. It's been about a year. The Guardian wrote about it. He disappeared from Parliament. He was there talking to all these MPs. And I wouldn't have done it if he wasn't my friend. I told Damo, get involved. Like, this is going to move. My friends got me in at half price. I can sort you out there. It's like, no, I'll stick to my index funds.
Be careful too.
I was like, don't worry, mate. I'm a crypto expert. I know what I'm doing. I do this as my career. Don't worry about me. And I lost.
That's the vulnerability.
And that's I was,
exactly.
And he was an expert as well.
He 100% had your trust. But looking back, were there any warning signs?
None. But we like Damo saying, obviously I know Damo a lot longer, but we like Damo saying, I'm
comparing me to this guy.
opening this business, and then he just does a runner. So yeah that was a rude awakening for me. And I didn't chase anyone. I didn't go to the bank because I assumed, because crypto, they advise you not to invest in crypto anyway. But it's
a high risk investment, isn't it?
Exactly.
But you don't necessarily expect to be scammed by a friend.
Exactly.
So.
But this is why they block the on-ramps, don't they? A lot of the banks won't even let you put into many of the major
But what the
exchanges.
scammers do, the scammers always find a way through. So although crypto is now sort of red flag, high risk, they've now found a way so they get people to transfer to Revolut or Starling or one of the...
Because they're crypto friendly.
They're less regulated. Yeah. And then from there, they'll put all the money into crypto. And then they won't get the money back from Revolut.
So what are some of the most common scams that you see or you get emailed about?
There's a lot of credit card fraud out there. But the good news is with that is that banks have to give you the money back, and they're generally very good at doing that. So credit card fraud. Bank transfer fraud is a very common one as well, which tends to involve much bigger amounts of money. So that's when people are transferring 10k, 100k to criminals that are pretending to be somebody else, sometimes a romance scam, sometimes pretending to be the bank. And then you've got your text scams and your phishing emails and things like that, and they're generally like precursors to much bigger scams, because they're often trying to get smaller amounts of money, but also personal details and like sort of package of personal details as well. They try and get everything at once, so PIN numbers and addresses and account details and things like that. And
then they target you through another scam that is not related almost.
Yes. banks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these scammers sort of tend to operate in like a big gang, and they'll have like different scripts that they'll deploy for different types of scams. So for bank transfer scams, like I mentioned, they will have different scripts. So the most common ones are pretending to be the bank's fraud department, and they'll ring you up saying, we've noticed that someone's tried to buy like an iPhone 13 on your account, £1,000. You need to move your money into a safe account. Now, a real bank would never, ever, ever do this. They would never. But people are scared, and they feel under time pressure because they're being told their money's at risk, and these people will appear to know everything about them, know all of that. They'll say, right, well, you've got this. Sometimes they'll even know what other bank accounts they've got. They'll say, well, you could move this to your Lloyd's account. It's so convincing.
They tried that with me, but I'm like, I have a Samsung and I would never buy an iPhone. So it's clearly not me that's bought this £1,000 iPhone 15 or whatever. So yeah, that's how I realised it was a scam. Samsung gang.
Yeah.
Well, you get them like trying to order an Uber Eats or something. Is that a precursor, or is that just some guy trying his luck to get some chicken?
Well, it could just be the guy trying to get the chicken, or it could be something really sinister.
Yeah.
We just don't know. But yeah, I mean, anything like that. It's like small things like the Royal Mail text or HMRC text, or you've got a rebate, just fill in your details here or something like that. Those are really common.
Yeah. How do you have any ways that you think people should protect themselves then, or
online?
Yeah, online and.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways. I mean, people need to be really careful of things that, I mean, the first rule is anything that feels and looks too good to be true probably is. Anything that's like time pressuring you to do something. So whether it's to click on a link that you don't necessarily like the look of, or you don't recognise, or to send money or personal details, be really wary of that. Just stop, and if you're not sure, just stop and think and ask a friend. Just be really careful of like giving out passport details, driving license details, like address. For goodness sake, don't give your PIN number away. Security code on the card, like all of this stuff. You've got to be so careful.
It's not just online though. Like I get text messages with my friends do as well. Like HMRC saying you owe us a tax bill, or Amazon saying your £500 purchase is going through, you need to call us.
Pay a quid to redeliver.
Yeah, that is the most convincing one, the Royal Mail delivery,
That's
or the
the one.
delivery things. Because at any given time, you usually are waiting for a package, aren't you? And it could likely be from Every or whatever, or Royal Mail or whatever they're pretending to be. So that's when you're
and
really
at risk.
Nothing.
So
yeah, exactly. So you think, oh, well, I'll just give... But that's a precursor for a big scam, because you're giving away all the details that they then need to ring you up and say, oh, but we already know your address and your account details and all this. So then you're like to trust them. Yeah.
So they're just trying to bait you in almost.
It's usually a phishing thing. Right. Or it could be, sometimes they try and get a bit of money off you at the time, but usually it's a precursor to then targeting you for a much bigger scam, where they'll come back under a completely different guise.
Pretend to be the bank, maybe.
Pretend to be the bank and say your money's at risk, you need to move it to another account.
Yeah.
And like websites as well. So if you get some of those scam texts, just look at who it's from, because sometimes they have like a picture saying HSBC, or it's from HSBC, but if you actually look at the number, it'll be from like a random number.
And if in doubt, just call your bank directly or whatever, off the number you trust.
Exactly. Always Google the number. Don't give the number that's in the email, because if it could be a scam email. So when Googling phone numbers, be really, really careful, because unfortunately search engines like Google do allow scam adverts right at the top. So never click on the advert, always go down and click on the genuine website and make sure that you check the URL.
What are the most sensitive bits of information though? Because it feels like we give out quite a lot on a regular, to be honest.
Yeah,
name, email, and then you go on Facebook, you can find out someone's date of birth pretty much, because you can just look and people are going, happy birthday, happy birthday. It's like, it doesn't take a genius to...
So the most dangerous combination is if somebody has all your details. So if they have your name, address, age, PIN number, account numbers, passport details, that's like the killer combination, because they could do anything with that.
Yeah.
They could use that for so much. They could potentially open a bank account. They could potentially use it to fool you into thinking that they were your bank. They could do so much with it. Whereas if they've only got like 1 or 2 bits of information, it's much harder to do anything dangerous with. So just be careful about giving out a lot of information at once. But obviously, if you're going to, like, people are shopping online all the time, and you've got to give your address, your email, your car details. People are giving that out on the regular, aren't they?
Yeah.
Damo, tell me about your scam.
You really want to hear it?
I need some balance out here. Yeah. All the viewers going to be like,
you're looking like a chump over here.
T's just getting scammed for fun. Next they're going to try to email me like, hey, T,
hi,
we've got an opportunity for you. Just send us some money.
Yeah. Mine was a little bit different. I mean, call it a scam, but it was more that I was just lied to. And it was like the emotional side of things. I got with someone. And at the time, I was quite young and naive, straight out of uni, thinking I was going to be a millionaire in no time. So this is kind of the mindset I was in. And I got into a relationship where I started getting with a girl, and she was like, "Oh, I'm going to get this big inheritance, and I would like it if you could manage it for me. So just quit your job." And I was just like, "This is it. I knew it. Manifested it." So I quit my job, and then. Yeah, 12 months later, no money showed up. I hadn't paid any rental bills, anything like that. And the whole time I just kind of wanted to believe it would happen.
But what were you actually doing? Were you managing
I just sitting on my ass, for 12 months. Yeah, it sounds crazy, but I almost couldn't believe that like my girlfriend at the time was like lying to me about, because it would just seem so ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then off the back of that though, I was in loads of debt. So I was like, oh, how am I going to fix all this debt? Well, I'll go work for a debt management company and I'll learn how to get people out of debt. And it made me really good. And then I flew through the ranks there. And then that all led to this now, really, the experience. But yeah, looking back as a naive 21-year-old, I didn't want to face up to the fact that it wasn't real. And it was all a lie. So I just kind of sat there for too long. And then I came and saw my uncle, and my uncle was like, "You need to get a goddamn job, mate. Like, she's chatting shit. She's." Was
he the one that made you see it was
yeah, it was right? Yeah, because I think it was just such an outlandish lie that it was like, why wouldn't you believe it? And there was like certain things that made me think it was real and all of this, but actually it was all just a lie. And then I heard 12 months later, she did the exact same to another guy.
Oh, wow.
These people often go on to do it again.
Yeah.
But it's interesting what you said about being so deep in it that you just couldn't face it not being true.
I knew it wasn't real.
Yeah.
For 2-3 months, I was like, oh, there's a delay and the money's stuck in China or something like this. Whatever it is. I don't know. I can't remember. It was ages ago. But yeah, after 7 to 8 months, it was like, this is not real. But I still wasn't ready to face that, because that then meant I've just wasted a year of my life, got myself into £30,000-40,000 worth of debt, quit my job, and now I've got to dig myself out of this hole. It's not just going to disappear.
And that's what I see time and again with people that are so deep in the scams. They just going along with that, almost like a fantasy is easier for them to do than to kind of rip themselves out into something much more scary, which is the truth.
Yeah.
And the fact that they have lost all this money or time or whatever it is, emotional stuff.
When you leave the club at 7 a.m, you step outside and it feels like that.
Yeah.
It feels like the cold day, and you're just like, oh, you're like, well,
I want to go back in.
Yeah. That's kind of, you want to live in the dream.
It's a good metaphor. Not thought of that one before.
It's a great metaphor.
But yeah, so I mean, I can admit to it now because I'm a lot older and a lot wiser. But this whole point about you can be vulnerable at different stages, and the vulnerability doesn't need to be a weakness. It can be a confidence. My confidence was that I was the man that was going to make loads of money. You were Mr. Crypto expert, so you couldn't be scammed. It's actually, that's the vulnerability in that moment.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
Don't click away. We're still here. If you enjoyed this episode, trust me, you're going to love this one. And if you want a summary of the episode, click the link below.
Can we click off yet? Yeah.
No, we're still going.